Hi, welcome back to PsychoBible, battling about psychology and theology. I'm Andrew Rodriguez. So recently I was blessed with the opportunity to participate in a sermon series at church about shame. And as a counselor, that's probably the main issue I talk about with my clients, or that we address in a variety of ways. It's really the crux of most of your addictions and mental disorders and just emotional complaints. So it's a very important topic, and as I was getting into that, I've also been trying to help my church with developing a lens for reading the scripture, and that's a honor shame lens, because the culture in which scripture is written or was written was an honor shame society, which is really the majority of the world. In the West, we're what's considered innocence guilt, where what we value is innocence and abiding by the law, and we're concerned about guilt from when we violate the law and breaking it and transgressing it. Whereas the majority of the world, their value system is based upon honor and shame as their currency, or honor is the currency and shame is the lack thereof, and what they're trying to avoid constantly. Now, in other parts of the world, there's like in animistic cultures, there's power, fear, and there may even be another type of cultural system of pollution and purity. But even those two are still secondary to honor shame. And the more I think about this topic, I'm coming to see how in the West that we view ourselves as being all about innocence and guilt and individuality and individual rights and responsibility, that is a surface way of viewing the world. And it's almost like as Jonathan Peugeot says in the Symbolic World and his series, he talks about the dead animal skin, that what we did after the fall, when we first became aware of our vulnerability, which that awareness came as a result in a break in our relationship with God, which is shame. Shame is the awareness of our vulnerability, which was caused by a break in the relationship with God. We put on these dead animal skins, these dead things, these things without life that protect us from the awareness of our shame and our vulnerability. And so the more I've been thinking about it, I've been thinking how the cultural lens we have in the West is a bit of a veneer. And that even in the West, even though we don't necessarily identify as honor-shame societies, we actually still are. That it's just, the honor-shame society is not just something from Asia and the Middle East and most of Africa or even Latin America, but it's universal to humanity, because it speaks of the universal human condition of shame and disconnection with God and with each other. So I'm growing in an awareness of this, and how honor and shame dynamics are inherent to even the West. And what I'm seeing as well is with the rise of multiculturalism, and with with what I want to get into with this video, with the left's progressivism, or so-called progressivism, and the LGBT values and advocacy, we're seeing this strange amalgamation of traditional Western values with the honor-shame societies. So recently I ran across this video in my YouTube feed that from a YouTuber I've never heard of before. I don't subscribe to him, but the topic, the algorithm picked it out, and it made sense because it's stuff I'm into. Because not only am I talking about shame, but I address issues of sexuality, and one of my favorite topics to discuss. And so it's this YouTuber who apparently used to identify as non-binary. And I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Is it Rolly or Raleigh? No offense to him about how he pronounces his name. So I had no background with him. It's the only video I saw of him. And so I want to do a little bit of commentary on his video because I think it's a really good example of what I'm talking about when it comes to the underlying honor-shame dynamics in the West, and how with the rise of multiculturalism and the LGBT movement, it's helping to bring those dynamics to the surface, as well as creating a new sort of culture in a way. And so I want to sort of examine his video, or at least the major parts of it, through a bit of an honor-shame lens. Okay.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to a brand new video. Okay, so triggered. This video is gonna annoy some people, I know. It's probably gonna upset some people. I know that it's just gonna be received very bizarrely, and this is something that I need to speak about because it's kind of just been a hot topic recently. So quite recently, I've had quite a few people asking me about this, and it's the question that keeps coming up is, am I still non-binary? Why do I not talk about it anymore? Like, what's going on? Like, some of you noticed that I took it all off my kind of like social medias. I've had a really bizarre experience and time with my gender like expression and identity. I came out as non-binary in 2015, December time 2015. Well, originally I was using the term gender fluid, but I then changed it more to non-binary because it was just easier to kind of say non-binary. I had such a weird reaction from people, and I was expecting to have lots of praise. I was expecting some confusion, but I was expecting like my audience at the time, because this was obviously a long time ago, to be quite happy and positive, and it wasn't anything like that.
So first thing I want to note is one of the core aspects of honor-shame societies is collectivism, whereas in the West we're all about individuality and individualism. In an honor-shame society, which still is right below the surface of the West, is collectivism, where the main value is group acceptance. So he says he used to identify as gender fluid, and then he determined, well, I'm going to come out as non-binary, which, if you haven't heard, so what that means is people who reject the idea of a gender dimorphism, that there's not just male or female, but just discards the entire idea of gender, and so, or at least that there's only two genders, so there's not a binary of male and female. So I'm not going to get into necessarily debating him on that or discussing that with this video, but just to explain what that means for anyone who doesn't know. So he figures he's going to identify as non-binary, and what he was expecting, because he's already part of the LGBT community, LGBTQ plus community, and he was expecting praise. So he was expecting honor. Praise in this setting would mean that the group, the community that he considers himself a part of, would respond to his choice with a recognition of his value. And that is what honor is. That in so doing that, then he would gain even more group acceptance, that he would be welcomed even more into the group. But as we see, that was not the case.
I was met with so much backlash, hate, rudeness, just horrific comments from within the community, I want to say, because all my audience, obviously, back then, especially was LGBT, because that's kind of all the content I was doing. I had so many people saying I was fake, I was using it for attention, I'm not actually this, I'm this label, I'm not this label, I'm actually this label, I'm actually this, I'm actually like, that was one of the main things. It was like, you're not this, you're this. I'm telling you what you are, you don't have any idea what you are, this is what you are. And it was just constant.
That's a really key part right there, where the group is telling him who he is. And that's another core aspect of the honor-shame societies. Identity is found in the group. In the West, we're so used to this idea of being self-made, that we're individuals, and so you determine who you are. And it's kind of funny because that's almost what helped birth the kind of transgender movement. It started off as this idea of, from your internal sense of, or internal feeling of who you believe you are, you then develop this identity that goes against what society usually says about your gender. And what's so interesting about this video is we see how things have ended up shaping, so that what started off as very countercultural and individualistic movement became its own subculture with its own hegemony and criteria for acceptance into the group. So now he can't just say, I'm non-binary. He has to meet the community's standards for non-binary. And so they're telling him, no, you don't know what you are. So you're fake, you're being pretentious, you're this is the label that you actually are. So he's now dependent on the group to tell him who he is. And that is the case in an honor-shame context, that we get our identity from relationship. Actually, throughout history, really, we start with identity is always determined by heritage, that it's passed down, or it can be changed or bestowed upon you by an authority. In an honor-shame society, the authority becomes the group itself. And as what started off as a very countercultural movement with the LGBT community, as it's become more solidified, they now have their dogma that they now enforce. So you're seeing it become its own culture, and it may put some people who are part of that community at odds with the community when they don't fit the dogma or the orthodoxy of that culture. So you can't escape this idea of having to fit what the culture says you should be, whether you're dealing with the larger culture of humanity or these subcultures like LGBT. And of course, LGBT is not one thing. It's a sort of an aggregate of a bunch of different subcultures. So, anyway.
Constant people just telling me I was wrong, I was stupid, I was just ignorant about these things, and I just had such a horrific time at that point. They're the people that I was looking to for support, to help me through this, to help me understand, to be loving and accepting, and all I got primarily was hate. And I'll be really honest, it never really stopped. It never really ended, and I'm going to get more into that.
It never really stopped. It never ended. And just keep that in mind, because he's going to sort of circle back to that later, and so I'll save my commentary for that. But keep that in mind. It's just, he just got hit with all this hate from the very community that he considered himself a part of. And I'm not part of that community myself. I would probably be part of the community that would typically criticize their belief system, but I would do so with some caution. And I look at his face right here, as he's going through this video, and I just really start to feel for him, because you see the dilemma he's in. He's already, by identifying as gay or trans in some way, or non-binary, already now at odds with the majority culture. And now receiving the backlash from that subculture he's a part of makes him this other type pariah. So it's a fascinating phenomenon that we're seeing here. And I don't know how common this is with others in the LGBT community, but I have some idea about why he might be even in the minority there, until there's enough people that will agree with him or identify with him and his plight. So let's continue.
It was just mad. So when I first came out and stuff, I forced myself into this box of non-binary because, you know, non-binary has a look. I would force myself to wear makeup. I forced myself to...
So that was another key part right there. Non-binary has a look. So he forced himself to wear makeup. And he says non-binary has a look with sarcasm and you can see like with some bitterness in his voice. And that's so telling right there, that what, like I said, what started off as this countercultural movement now solidified, and they have their orthodoxy, they have their dogma. So he now has to conform in order to be part of that group. And he literally had to force himself to wear makeup. And I think in his channel there are some clips, or in this video itself, it shows some other clips of him where he's got some makeup, he's got contact lenses, anything to sort of distort which gender he may be part of, to make it seem more ambiguous, or even just something with the contact lenses, like that's not even human looking. So it has a look. There's a particular look we expect of people who claim to be non-binary. And so he had to do certain things in order to fit into the group. So this speaks of another aspect of honor-shame societies, and that is the conformity. That in order to be accepted into the group, you have to conform to certain standards through the way you express yourself, the way you dress, the way you speak, and the beliefs you hold, of course. But even if it's to the point of not being your own individual and not being authentic to yourself, if you want to be accepted into the group, you have to fit these certain criteria.
To wear heels. I forced myself to look androgynous. I forced myself, well, as much as I could, and I forced myself to be what everyone said that I had to be in order to be non-binary, which is completely ludicrous. Looking back now, I'm so ashamed of myself for doing that, because I'm more of a leader. I suddenly switched roles and suddenly
sacrificing his individuality and sacrificing his own values, he now feels ashamed of himself. So that stood out to me. But at the same time, I don't know. I didn't even know what date this was, so I don't even know how recent this video is. So who knows? Will he face more shame for now disowning the community who's considering himself a part of? He's still going to be in the LGBT community, but that subset of non-binary, will he face more shame? Well, we're going to get into that in a second here, because probably the attacks he was receiving was enough for him to be like, nah, not worth it, don't need it.
Someone I used to be friends with a long time ago basically was horrific in one of the panels and made me so uncomfortable and feel so awful that I vented on Twitter, because I was really upset about this, and like all of their little group then started tweeting about me and like saying all this horrible stuff and just it was constantly like backstabby and two-faced and just horrific. And I was just, at this point I was like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to be associated with these people anymore. I don't want to be part of this catty group. And again, because the community is quite small, I was always lumped with these people. So anything else that happened, it was always like, oh, we've got this person on the panel, and it's like, great.
That was another part where it stood out to me when he says, because of the backstabbiness, they're so backstabby and petty and divisive, he decided, I'm not going to associate with them anymore. And so it lost for him the incentive to stay part of this community, the attacks and the betrayal. Now he's about to get into some aspects of the group that I found quite telling as well.
I know people who literally know people who have added labels to themselves to appear more, wacky or to appear more interesting. I know people who have said that they go by they, them, and then as soon as cameras go off, they use he pronouns. I know people who have said so much. I know people who are lying to you, and I know people who are fake, and I know people who are so horrible, and it's so sad that people don't catch on. And I don't want to start like a crap show by naming people. Be very careful with who you watch, because not every single person is very nice, and not every single person seems as authentic on camera as they are in real life. It's such an eye-opener doing this as a job, and it's such an eye-opener going to events. It's such an eye-opener.
I mean, all right, so that little bit right there revealed a whole lot to me. First, he points out the fakeness, that there are people who claim to be non-binary and will use they, them pronouns instead of he, her, or she, her, whatever, pronouns in public, but then behind the scenes they'll use he, her pronouns, and he, him, and she, her. So, what's that about? Does it mean that we can even trust what we're hearing when we have these people saying that they're non-binary and they're forcing us or trying to strong-arm us into using their preferred pronouns? Like, can we even trust that they have genuine motives? This is one of the points that Jordan Peterson was making when it came to Bill C-16, and people asking, well, hey, would you use someone's pronouns? And originally when he was asked this question, his response was, it depends on their motives. And people were like, what? How dare you judge people's motives? And the reality is, what this guy is revealing in this video is, you gotta be careful. Not everyone is being genuine in this community. So that was very fascinating, and that you have to watch out for them. This is the other part that stood out to me from this section here, is that he is still concerned about receiving continued shame and backlash from this community that he just said he's leaving, the particular non-binary community. So he knows things from behind the scenes about who's real and who's fake, who's genuine in their belief about being non-binary, and you see the struggle in him. It's like, oh, I really want to tell you all the truth, but he doesn't want to get the backlash if he does it, so he'll keep it to himself. So you see there still a bit of loyalty, enough to, or at least some saving his own skin, maybe not so much saving his face, but trying to preserve what honor he has in the group, and also to protect himself, because who knows, I guess he knows enough behind the scenes to see how much they could ruin him if he were to reveal their names and reveal how fake they are. So that was a part that stood out from this section, and just how eye-opening it was for him. He says at the end of this little discourse, it's been so eye-opening doing this as a job. So that says something else. I'm not sure as much from an honor shame perspective, but just maybe more from a capitalist perspective, is once you start to monetize your activism or your identity, you now have like incentive to keep this up. So there's no room, or at least not as much opportunity to really question yourself. So he's still in the LGBT community, so he's not going to lose all of his fan base, and he never really is fully accepted into the non-binary community, so he probably isn't going to lose much by making this video. But boy, imagine if he were to start to say, you know what, I'm not sure if I want to identify as gay anymore. This is his job. He's an advocate for this community. He's a spokesperson. This is his life and his livelihood. So there's a great risk of changing his opinion. So you know what? Actually, that is an aspect of honor shame, because of the conformity and the group acceptance that will often prevent people from making a worldview change. and a lifestyle change. And to be excluded from your home community, from your family, from your clan, your tribe, is death. When you understand how much we are made for relationship, to be excluded from those relationships where you get your identity from, without a replacement community, that is like a death sentence. As we're seeing almost, I think we're seeing with the gay community, we're going to create some circumstances that will be very similar to, say, Muslims in the Arab world, or pretty much most of the Arab or Muslim world, as it expands, who, if they decide to convert to Christianity, they're doing it at great personal risk and loss. And some of them are scared to do that. They are convinced of Christianity and the truth of it, but they're scared to make that step because they don't want to lose their connection to their family that they've identified with. Not to mention, they're scared to endure persecution, or not endure persecution, but simply be wiped out by it. So it's at great personal risk that they might make that lifestyle and worldview change. So as the progressive left becomes so much more intolerant of any other perspective, it reduces the freedom of the individuals that are in the LGBT community. So they can't simply be like, well, maybe I do want to explore change, or maybe I don't want to. Maybe I want to have an actual traditional family and not continue to identify as gay or trans. Well, no. If you do that, you lose everything. You lose your whole community. So that's a huge loss. So they're making a very much where there's no middle ground. There's no room for exploration. So it's fascinating to see where this movement is going.
This is kind of one of the reasons why I started wanting to do this video. So this person didn't know someone else's pronouns. I can't remember the exact wording of what they said, but basically they referred to the person as they instead of he or she. And this person responded to them in a really bitchy way, saying that they don't go by they pronouns because they go by neo pronouns. And I was just like, okay, so if anyone doesn't know, neo-pronouns are ones that are outside kind of like the three known ones, like he, her, and they. Like it's outside of them. So there's like Zim, there's one called Gem, there's like, Gem, self, whatever, Zim, Z. I don't know, there's so many, I don't know literally any of them. And this person was slagging this other person off for not using a neo-pronoun, when literally no one knows what neo-pronouns are. Literally, I'm inside the community and I only found out what neo-pronouns were recently. Like, I had no idea about all this stuff, and there's like literally hundreds of these pronouns that you can use. And like, how is anyone supposed to know that this is a thing? How is anyone supposed to know what this is without you telling them first? And the fact that this person didn't want to misgender them, so they used they, them pronouns, but then they were getting attacked for using they, them pronouns. I was just like, are you actually serious? Are you actually serious? There's someone there who tried not to, trigger you or something, and then you still attack them because they tried. Like, what is the point? Why is this happening? What?
So, he's just getting into the probably faux outrage, but he continues with some more stories that really illustrate how the people in the trans and the non-binary community just are looking for offense. So even when someone is trying to be sensitive to them but messes up, even though they were meaning to be sensitive to their pronouns, they didn't know that they use neo pronouns like Z and Zer, but used plural pronouns because that's probably the safest route to go. They got chastised. And so what you're starting to see here as we continue through here is the outrage. And it makes him sad, and it's making me sad to see it as well. But as we keep watching, we'll see the tactics that they use to enforce the conformity.
Famous something else then if you're that upset about it. Like, no one's making you name it snowman just because it's more known as that. And it's like, you're literally, there are so many more important things that are going on in the trans and non-binary community that you need, that you could be fighting for, that you could be helping, that you're literally bitching and whining about the most trivial of things, when all it does is just make the community look like a joke, and it makes everyone just look stupid. If that is literally your only concern, you are very, very lucky. You are very privileged if that is your only concern in life.
So that's another interesting comment he made there about within the non-binary and trans community, there are certain people who are complaining about so many just petty things, like, oh, why is it called a gender-bred man instead of gender-bred person, or why is it called a snowman instead of a snow person? It's like, just call it whatever you want. That's petty. It doesn't matter. And he's realizing that by these people's behavior, it brings shame upon the community by making us look like a joke. So once again, an honor shame perspective with that is that your individual actions don't just affect you, they affect the entire group that you're part of. They either bring honor to the group or they bring shame upon the group. And when it brings shame upon the group, what we ought to do, or the way from an honor shame society is, we ought to exclude the one who brings shame upon the group. What he's seeing, however, is that it actually brings more, at least to the people in the group, they believe it brings them more honor. To be more outraged brings them more honor. And so he's noticing this, and it's exasperating him because, like, there's something wrong with our hierarchy of values here, that we value all this petty offense, and it makes us look like a joke to the larger community. And so it's like, am I the only one who sees this? So I might as well just get out of this community if they're not seeing this as well. That's basically where he's going with it, because they're building their whole value structure around being offended, and it's not going to advance their causes. What it will do is it might advance their causes temporarily through using fear and coercion upon the larger culture, but that's going to have a backlash, and you're seeing it grow with the anti-PC movement.
So another thing going on that and going back to the community side of it, I really, really, really dislike how attacky and how people who just do not give any thought on how another person feels, who are outside the community, who doesn't understand, who might say the wrong thing, and instead of trying to enlighten this person and help them, they just go, "You're cancelled," and they try to shame them online. When a lot of this comes from ignorance, a lot of it comes from just not understanding rather than hatred. Not every single person who misgenders you, not every single person who says like the wrong thing is trying to attack you or does it because they hate you. It purely comes from not understanding. You weren't born knowing what non-binary means. You had to learn what that meant. You had to understand it. You had to discover that. That's something that you had to understand. You didn't just instantly know, I'm non-binary, this is what this.
So I actually, he used this term a few times. You're cancelled. It's just, it cracks me up. That's such a drama queen way to attack someone. So it's funny that he mentions that's the term they use. You're cancelled. It's also kind of, it shows our techie world. You cancel a show, you cancel a program. So that's funny how we use that now to it as an attack. But the main point I want to get to with that section is how, from an honor shame perspective, how we use shame to enforce conformity as well as to protect the integrity of the community. So even though the example he's giving here is for how they'll shame people who aren't part of the community for not understanding things about the community, they'll do the same thing for people that are in the community if they step outside the lines of the orthodoxy. And so they'll shame them, they'll attack them, and that's what he's coming to realize is how attacky they are. They will just come on down on them hard, and especially in social media, they can dogpile like crazy. That's why I'm not on Twitter. It's just, I don't need that in my life. And it's not just to attack people, but it's also to protect the integrity of the group. With integrity, I mean not so much virtuous integrity, but just to protect the cohesion of the group and the orthodoxy of the group. So this is what makes us who we are. That's the integrity of the group. So they'll use shame to enforce that and protect it. Okay, let me skip ahead here to the final section I want to review.
Anyone tries to open up a dialogue with someone who's outside the community, they're instantly known as a traitor. They're instantly known as like a horrific person. My friend Lacey did a video with Blair White, and Blair White's quite known as like, she's trans, but she also like doesn't believe in non-binary. She only believes there's two genders. Lacey was trying to discuss with her about her feelings and just tried to reason with her and tried to kind of, get these points across. And instead of going, that's great that they're trying to open a dialogue, they're trying to like come to some, just try to understand how other people feel. It's like Lacey's cancelled, she's a horrendous person because she's trying to educate people. She's trying to help people outside the community understand. You don't make change in the world by shouting at the people that agree with you. You make change in the world by shouting at not shouting, but talking to the people who don't understand, that's how change is made. So many historical events have changed, and these things didn't happen because they just spoke to their friends on the side of the bar. No, they went out and they protested. They went out and they opened dialogue with people who didn't understand and tried to come to an agreement rather than just being like, you're not in the community, so you're cancelled. You need to talk to people who don't agree with you to change the world. You can't just talk down an echo chamber and expect everything to change. No, that's not how change works. So I hate the fact that anyone who talks to anyone else, it's just instantly you're a traitor. You're a horrible person. I don't really don't understand at all.
And that's the final part I want to get into. Is one of the main values in an honor shame context is loyalty. So if you cease to promote the values of the group and to stay within the boundaries of the group, you're a traitor, and that brings great shame upon you and the group. There'll be the effort to exclude and shun that person, to make an example of them, that you're a traitor, so we need to make it clear. You see this in just your typical urban subculture of snitches get stitches. So you betrayed the group, you betrayed loyalty. It doesn't matter if it was to do what's right. This is where just reinforces my point from before, at the very beginning, that we have this idea that in the West, our value system is all about rules and guilt and following the rules and doing what's right. And I think that's very surfacey, because when it comes down to it, people will stay loyal to people that, even when they know that the people that they're staying loyal to are in the wrong, because we ultimately care more about connection and relationship. So on the surface, we would say, no, the right thing to do would be to turn that person in, or to try to pressure them to do the right thing. But we have enough subcultures in our society that abide by a different dynamic, and that is snitches get stitches. And it might have different terms in other subcultures, but you definitely hear that in the urban subculture. But I'm sure it's the same deal with like the Deep South and the West, and that you stay loyal, you keep your mouth shut because family comes first, or whatever the case is. So the group comes first. You stay loyal to them. You don't go outside the group. You don't associate with people outside the group in any meaningful way, except to use them or to get transactions that then benefit the group. So open up dialogue. Why would you do that? That means you might end up... Dialogue means that, to borrow from some other people in the community, that the intellectual dark web, you might colonize them so, mentally. That if I dialogue with you, your ideas might colonize my mind, and my ideas might colonize yours. So we prefer that. Yeah, we're going to colonize you and have our ideas overtake yours. But there's also a chance if you're dialoguing that the reverse may happen as well, and we don't want to take that chance. So we are going to just stay in our echo chamber and just reinforce our worldview and not dialogue people outside of it. So those are just some of my thoughts that came to my mind when I saw this video, and how it just, the honor-shame dynamics really become apparent in these growing subcultures that are rising up due to the left's progressivism, such as the LGBT community and certain other multicultural groups in the country. So it's fascinating to see where this is going. I hope what it does is helps awaken people to our underlying honor-shame dynamics in the West, and so that we can better address these conflicts. Because what the problem the right is making is we're using the wrong arguments usually to try to convince people on the left, and the arguments are usually based on rules and about standards and principles, and that's not the language that these subcultures are speaking. They ultimately want to know first, do you accept me? And will you include me? They're about inclusion. Those are all honor-shame values. Whereas we're using, well, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and it's not speaking their language, because now it's a new culture. So I'm not even sure what the answer is. How are we going to bridge that gap? I don't know. Find out. So anyway, just some ramblings. I didn't want to make this a terribly long video, but if you have any thoughts, please dialogue with me. Let's colonize each other's minds. So please like, share, and I'll see you in the future. God bless.